So welcome formally to the Asian Supervision Network. And Chi, why don't you introduce yourself for people who do not know you? This is going to be recorded. Many people cannot come but watch the recording later.
Sure. So I'm Tim Sprague. I'm based in Sydney. It's winter and it's raining here, unfortunately. And I've come to supervision through the Oxford Books program as well. And Tatiana has been our supervisor in my peer group for a few years, and now Peter is. So uh, very happy to be involved in the supervision process. And for some of you who've gone through the Oxford Books process, um, today's presentation will be a recap, and then we'll just discuss how it plays out for you, others that may be new. So look, I will go into presentation mode, and I'll do just a very short presentation on this 3Ps model. And if I can just manage to see everybody and share. Come on. Sorry.
It's okay. Sometimes it's tricky to share a screen.
Yeah. I'm looking for the share link right now. Oh, here we go. Share.
I am also sharing the
Hopefully you can
presentation
see that.
in the chat box that you sent me, Tim. So if people want to follow the presentation and the document, the article you sent me, I posted them now in the chat box for everybody.
Right. Yeah, so this comes from an article and a process that's used in Oxford Brookes. And hopefully you can see the screen now.
Yes, we can see it very well.
Great. Okay, so this is the 3Ps process. The concept is that we coach from who we are, so that the idea of neutrality in my mind is a fake idea. That we can be neutral in coaching is no less true than we can be neutral in the real world. You know, when we experience stuff, we have emotional reactions, and they're based on our beliefs. I think when we experience things in the coaching process, our behaviors are governed by what we believe to be true, what we believe coaching is about, what we're trying to achieve with coaching, and that leads to the process we adopt in coaching. And so the 3Ps include two of the inputs, which is our philosophy, what we believe works in coaching, our purpose, what we believe we're trying to do in coaching, that then leads to our process and how we actually coach in the moment, what we decide to do at any point in time while we're coaching. That's as simple and as complicated as it gets. And as I said, it comes from Peter Jackson and Tatiana Bachkirova. So the three slides on each of those are: the philosophy is how we believe people change. Almost necessarily, if we're coaching, we have to adopt a growth mindset as one of the parts of our philosophy. If we don't believe people change, then why the hell are we coaching? But obviously, it gets more complex than that because we have multiple beliefs in terms of what works with coaching and how coaching can be effective. And that's our theoretical perspective and our assumptions about how human nature changes. For example, in my own practice, I take a fairly cognitive behavioral approach. So I believe that if we just change the behavior without changing mindset, then the behavior will change back. So that informs the questions I ask. I'm not just going to say, what is it that you want to do? I'm going to say, what are you thinking about what you want to do? And you can see that, you know, this may be fairly simplistic, but it's a way of illustrating. Then the purpose. So some people will say the purpose of their coaching is simply to support the goals of the coachee. I have to say I have a secret agenda, which is not that secret because I always share it with my coachees. So I've put my view of what my purpose is, which is that I'm helping the coachees achieve their goals. but I'm also considering their well-being, and I'm also considering scaffolding them to be able to think better, to solve problems better. And so my philosophy then leads into my purpose, which is, why the hell are we coaching people? And it could include things like, as we move into our purpose for supervision, what is supervision for? Is it for reflection? Is it to help the coach develop, which may be the same thing? Is it to make sure that the coach is psychologically safe, or the coachee? Is it to help the coach with their techniques? Is it to help the coach understand the system they're in? Is it to make sure they don't stuff up? Or is it about improving society as a whole, or any or all of those? And if we know what our purpose is, then we know that, well, that's likely to drive in terms of our behavior. And so the last one is then that leads to our process. So if we take our philosophy and our purpose, that leads to what our process is. And then that process leads to our practice in the moment, what we choose to do at any point in time. As I said at the offset, I believe neutrality in coaching is false. I believe we're consciously and constantly choosing what we do, not just as a reaction to what the coachee says, but about our beliefs about what coaching is about and what we believe coaching, what happens in coaching that works. And so we can choose to speak, or we can choose to pause. If we speak, we can choose to reflect or question or praise. And we can choose what type of questions we ask. And in each case, those choices are based on our purpose and philosophy, and they make a difference in terms of where the coaching goes. So yes, we're client-led, but the questions we lead will also help the client head in different directions. I personally have been reflecting on the fact that I praise my coachees a lot, and whether or not I need to pause and think about, okay, yes, it's great that they've done that, but should I be pushing them a little bit more, or getting them to reflect a little bit more? And these are the choices we make. So they can come away from coaching feeling good that they've done good, and or they can come away from coaching thinking they've done good and they might need to do different. And my choices will affect that. So that's the presentation on how philosophy and purpose impact process, and then how that leads into supervision of a coachee is something I'd like to discuss with the group. Any questions about the model first, and then let's have a more open discussion. Okay, so I guess the model's fairly clear. So let's open it up a bit. So in our own practice, how does our philosophy affect what we choose to do, and how does our philosophy and how does our purpose reflect what we need to do? And I'm wondering, Damien, this group's a little bigger than the last time we met. Would it be better if we do this in breakout?
Yeah, because in that way everybody can participate. It's easier to participate in triads. Or I think we have three triads. We can do three triads. Is everybody able to participate in small group conversation? And in that way, everybody can share what is your philosophy. What I found, Tim, about this model that is interesting is that we give a lot of things for granted. That sometimes we don't stop to challenge or reflect some of the assumptions that we have about all of these things. But they're very interesting. Okay, so let's do three groups.
Okay, so you're going to set that up, Damien?
Yeah, I am doing it right now.
Great, thanks.
And I am trying to make these groups diverse. Great. Okay, so do you think 10 minutes? Would that be okay?
I think that'd be great.
Okay, so let me back in 10 minutes, and then maybe one person can report for everybody. Oksana, great to see you. Welcome. It's been a while. Great to see you here. So let's open the rooms.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Sorry, I was a little bit late, but I'm happy to be here.
Great, great. Okay, welcome back. Tim, you're on mute.
Of course. So, people, somebody who's the representative for their group want to speak about what they discussed in terms of purpose and philosophy and how it affects practice?
I'll go, Tim, whilst it's fresh in my mind.
Thanks, Jackie.
I was with Tim and Sraban, and Sraban was coming at this question from working with supervision clients, so coaches, working with coaches. I was looking at it from both individual coaching that we do, team coaching that we do, and also my sort of new work that I'm doing in supervision myself. So, and we had quite different views. Sraban, and please jump in, Sraban, if I misrepresent anything you said. He was saying from the perspective of when we're working with anybody, be it a supervisee or a coachee, that we may have a model, we may have several models, we may have things and philosophies in our mind that come up. As Tim said, you know, we're humans, so we're going to have assumptions that come into our mind as we are, you know, that are rooted in some of our early training, our early beliefs, etc. Shravan was indicating that we have those, but really it's about what is resonating for the individual in front of us, what models may they wish to bring or not, and what's driving their behavior in the moment and working with that. Is that right, Shravan, to an extent?
I think what I'm saying, there's a 3 person here, supervisor, supervisee, and a client.
3 people,
yeah. And each person has got 3 models at the back of it. So when a supervisor is working on that, they are checking their own philosophy and purpose. It also during interaction with a supervisee in the session, also trying to check what are the purpose and philosophy he is bringing on the table whenever he is doing coaching to his client.
Yeah.
And whenever you are doing that, you are trying to see that any particular process or activity they have done in the coaching session, what was the philosophy behind that? What was the purpose he has intervened that action step? Through that process, we are checking their value, we are checking their behavior, you are taking the assumptions and mindset. So it is not only the what supervisor 3 models. At the back of that, we try to reflect on similar line in the supervision session, asking similar question to check supervisory purpose, supervisor philosophy. That was my point of view. So it is more of interaction modules, or more parallel process, whatever we call in supervision.
So, as always, as soon as we dive into it, it becomes more complex. Because, yes, I'm saying that the supervisee's purpose and philosophy interacts with the system and determines what's going on. But, of course, there are other actors in the system, as Shraban's saying, and they come with their own philosophies and purpose about what should be happening in coaching, and that influences the conversation as well. Yeah, thanks for expanding that system for us. Who wants to speak from another group? Well, there's only 2 other groups.
I'll try. So Scott and Oksana, please butt in if I'm misinterpreting. So we talked about a little bit about, supervision, and you put that list up of why supervision, what's the purpose of supervision. And my comment was that it was all of the above and anything else that the supervisee wants to bring in the moment because it's pertinent, relevant, whatever. And also my other point was that, what's relevant in this session of supervision may not be what's necessary in the next supervision session because things change, etc. Systems change, people, different things are happening. So that was one thing that we talked about. And then we talked a little bit about how that might also apply in coaching. What are you bringing with you when you come into a coaching session? And what's we'd all come from slightly different backgrounds in our coaching training. But in the end, I think what we were talking about was it's what's necessary in the moment. Mm-hmm. What does the client need in the moment, regardless of the not being locked into a particular model or a particular framework or a particular set of competencies. And Oksana mentioned that she felt that she was doing a lot in her coaching. I hope it's okay to mention that she thought that she was almost doing a mixture of supervision and coaching in the work that she's doing. And for me, I thought that was very beautiful because it's a reflection of what her clients need in the space that she's providing for them. I hope I covered what we kind of said.
I just had a couple of points. You did great, Elizabeth. One was as we started to think that assumptions in our philosophy of coaching or supervision could be endless. I mean, you just keep coming up with more. Second, one of the main purposes of supervision as a profession is to provide the space to dig into what is in our philosophy that we're not even aware of, and we're bringing into the conversation.
Yeah. And so, as Elizabeth was saying, this philosophy plays into our coaching as coaches as much as it plays into our supervision. And I think one of the things we can do in supervision is make a coach more conscious of their philosophy in the moment and the things that their assumptions and their beliefs in the moment, simply by asking, so what did you think was happening here? And what did you believe was happening? And I think those kind of questions are really good questions in supervision because they get at these philosophies and purposes behind the actions we're taking in coaching. Thanks for that. Thanks, both of you. So who's last?
I'll be brave and have a go. We had quite a lot of discussion, so I guess we looked at the philosophy a little bit, and Genevieve was saying that she comes from the place of, I'm not even going to do this justice. I think there was so much information in what you said. It's like, how do I download this? It was more about developmental stages and things like that. The things that she's really interested in are the things that drives her in her supervision. And I was really curious about that, why that has her attention, why she wants to focus in that direction. And we also spoke about who we are when we're supervising, and Carrie was reflecting on some experiences that she's had in the supervision space where trying not to fall into the trap of coaching and being more in that reflective space and holding that that listening, I guess, and that consideration of who the coaches are being at the time. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not doing the whole conversation a lot of justice, but it did make me think about my philosophy and more coming from, I like that whole-bodied way of coaching, is that I'm really listening to the whole neuroscience part of it, the head, the heart, the gut, what's happening internally, those feelings. And I'm often in my supervision space asking my supervisees what it is that they're present to, the feelings within their own body and their own system. you know, where they're feeling stuck or anxious or holding their breath or those sort of things where they're not daring to ask the questions, you know, perhaps they're sitting on it and chewing on it and things like that, rather than daring to ask. That comes up a lot. A lot of people hold back, not wanting to offend or, you know, poke the bear. So, yeah, that came up. That was just out of listening to the other two. Yeah.
And just hearing you have that reflection, it shows how our philosophy drives the questioning we do. If you're a real cognitive person, you're going to ask, what were you thinking? If you're a whole body person, you're going to ask questions about, well, what was you thinking? But also head, heart, and gut, what are you experiencing in your body? And we can see how that our philosophy will drive the different questions that we will ask. So I think that was a good explanation there, Davia.
And then there's some listening attached to that as well, because the language that goes with, you know, digesting information, well, you know, that's going to go to a gut identity kind of thing. So, yeah, it's what are you embodying or prepared to embody.
I can maybe add something to what you're saying, Davia, because I thought about my philosophy being directed to developmental coaching and existential coaching, because you can touch very deep subject like emotion, freedom, unknown, and values, and that's very important. And people are not thinking. I mean, just helping people making sense of the way they are making sense of their life. So it's very deep. So I'll just stop there. As my philosophy today, having gone through Oxford's books as well, where I met Damien and then Michel Moral, the Seven Eyes, and now feel my really go-to is developmental and existential, because that is what all life is about.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Thanks for that. And I think it does show, as each person has a philosophy, it informs again what we choose. So I'm only restating. So what does having this awareness of purpose and philosophy do for us in terms of our supervision practice? What does it teach us, or what does it suggest we should be doing differently, if anything?
Tim, what I was thinking with the question and listening to everybody and thinking for myself is that also how over the years our philosophy and our goals changed too.
Sure.
You know, because here we have very mature coaches, people who have been doing for a long time, and now they're also supervisors. So I was thinking that probably I would have answered the question differently.
Okay.
A few years
I was
ago,
thinking
then
exactly that, Damien, as you spoke.
yeah.
I was thinking exactly that, because and I mentioned in our group, what one is typically trained in, original training, whether it be supervision training or coach training, that does typically inform the way we coach in the early years. And then as we go through our own development, our own adult maturity, we then let go of some things and we connect in other ways to other philosophies as we grow and change. And working with people teaches us that as well. So for instance, one of the things that Tim said very early on around his philosophy, as he started the presentation, is around, he believes that if somebody just decides to change and then the mindset's not with it, sometimes the person will revert back. And I would have agreed with that. And yet, working with people over time, people have surprised. Clients have surprised me, coaches have surprised me in terms of one person I'm working with has made an intellectual decision that they want to show up in different ways, and for all the good reasons they've shared. And they actually have managed to sustain that over a period of time. I would have never thought that was even possible. So I'm now, that then makes me shift my own and broaden my own philosophy, I suppose, on anything's possible. You just never know what someone's going to do. Or yeah, so that was what I was thinking. You change your mind over time.
Yeah, so as Damien's saying, experience change, and you're just giving us an example. Experience changes our philosophy over time.
Yeah.
So
And
others
yeah,
comments on that, or about their path and how their philosophy has changed over time?
and what I want to make just a brief connection to your question is that we may have blind spots based on our philosophy. So sometimes we may not know what we are missing just because we're working on one philosophy, or because we had that philosophy, we may be blind or not paying attention to other things. So it's wondering for all of us as supervisors what may be our blind spots. It's like, because the philosophy should be like a compass in some way, knowing what is your philosophy and what is important to you and what is your goal should guide you. Like, for example, for me, is awareness. So for me, as a coach, I want my client to have higher level of awareness. As a supervisor, I want the coaches to have higher level of awareness. When I work with leaders, this is my thing. Like, I want to enhance and increase the level of awareness of everybody around me, so the world can be a better place for everybody. So like that's my personal goal. And then how you adapt that to the unique needs and goals of each client that you work in each context. But it would be naive team to say, no, I don't have any goal. It's just what the client said. It's that's the reason why we choose this. That's the reason why we are coaches, supervisors, are not doing something else. I think. I don't know. I don't know, Tim, what do you think about what I'm saying? What is your reaction to that?
I was thinking that over time, in that developmental stages as a coach, you're in that learning phase early on, and you're downloading all this information, and then you go away and you practice it. And at that stage, you're still aware of what you're doing. And then after a few years, it becomes a part of who you are, and you've totally embodied that way of coaching. And then you get to this stage where you actually forget what you learned. You're just doing it. And then you lose the language for describing it. I noticed last night I went to another webinar. It was on emotional intelligence, and they were telling me things that I already knew that I'd learned years and years and years ago. But it was like, oh, there's language I'd forgotten that I could label it that way. It was, oh, I'm not learning something new. I'm relearning the language around that. And I think that there's a space in supervision for staying present to what you know and what you've learned over time, that it's kind of like a revisiting of it. And yeah, keeping it present, keeping your understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Okay. Gina Reed.
Yes, and definitely that's why I love the developmental approach, because we always say that whatever we notice and become aware of, we help the client becoming aware of something, the sense making, what sense are they making of their life, and we need to hold it lightly and always asking ourselves, how can we be wrong? So this is always the discussion that is there. We hold it lightly in the discussion and we say, how can I be wrong? Because we're never sure that it is 100% sure, and even we can be biased because what we are seeing might be different from what the supervisor himself is experiencing in one way or the other.
Which comes to that part Damien was saying about blind spots. We've said that our philosophy and our purpose may develop over time, but it also may get fixed, and we start looking for confirmation and we have confirmation bias, and then we put that onto our coachee. So I think that's something to be watching as well. Others' views?
I'm finding that there's kind of a path in my coaching where I was in a very supportive space, working with people going through bereavement and grief and things like that. And as I developed as a coach, bringing more of the willingness to challenge thinking and go into that more reflective space. I find as a new supervisor, I'm back in that sort of cycle of being sort of drawn to the supportive, the restorative space. And so I was watching that. I was working with the supervisee last week, and she presented her case, but then all of a sudden what emerged in her system was she's a new mother with a baby. And, she's a single mother. She's chosen to be unpartnered in mothership, and how she makes this work with, juggling a coaching practice. And it was really interesting to see myself sort of going back in that very supportive stance of, addressing that in her system and sort of, losing sight of the case that she brought. So that was just kind of interesting.
And that's more the purpose part of it. Is my purpose here to support? Is my purpose here to challenge? And how we balance that. Yeah.
She starts
definitely.
crying in the middle of the session,
Yeah,
I go for support. That's just my superpower. I can make anybody cry on a dime. So
But even supporting, we can be a bit challenging, because it's yeah, definitely. We
Yeah.
can be a bit challenging, supporting and asking the client in which direction they would like to go,
Others.
One of the things that hit me was, as I reflect back on conversation, supervision, or coaching that did not go well, it was likely a mismatch of philosophies, right? And I had a path and they weren't following that path. And obviously they perceived me in the same way. And so to think about your own, but also in essence to be a philosophy detector to try to discern what their philosophy or path about how this should go is, right? Which we kind of call contracting, but it's like, wow, there's a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're recontracting as we learn more about what their philosophy is and how it matches with ours. True. Other people's views. One of the themes I also heard, and maybe this is because it resonates with me, I like the idea of being an eclectic. I like saying, oh, well, I actually use lots of different models and this model matches with this coachee, so I'll choose that in the moment. There must be a philosophy I have that overarches those, which says that I need to swap. That actually, like all models, I said this in the small group, all models are wrong, some are useful. So how do I decide, and what is my driver in swapping? Okay, I've realized that it's a deeper issue, or I realize that what they need now is support, or I realize whatever. How am I swapping is a really good question around my own process and how my philosophy might change in the moment about what might be the most effective thing to do. And I find that a really useful thing to do when I'm working with my coachees as a supervisor. Do people have a similar experience, or those that have multiple frames they use?
I think I tend to agree with you there. I was reflecting on, I'm working in Japan, and supervision is really only in its absolute infancy. It's very few coaches in Japan have supervision, and I've recently started coaching a number of actual Japanese who are things. So I notice in myself that I'm supervising them in a slightly different way, not just because of language and cultural, but also because they have no idea what supervision is and why they're showing up in supervision, other than they've started to have an awareness that it's actually important to them as their development and maturity as a coach. So one of the things that I've really noticed in myself is I may be working quite differently with somebody who's Japanese, and I might be doing it also in a bilingual session in Japanese and in English, which also affects how I can work. But also they're coming with so little knowledge of supervision and so little experience compared with, say, supervisors that I might be working with in Europe.
So I'm hearing two threads in that. One is cultural, but the other is developmental in terms of their own understanding of what supervision is. Yeah. And I think we've got to be attuned to both of those things. The cultural I find really hard. I work a bit in Southeast Asia, but a mate of mine, John Raymond's doing his PhD in cross-cultural coaching at the moment. And for example, I didn't know this, but in Chinese, in Mandarin, I think it is, there's no real word for reflection that translates. So when you ask somebody to reflect, the closest translation is you did something wrong, you need to go and reflect on that. And so understanding how people hear what's happening in coaching, when I have a philosophy of what I'm trying to do and what they're receiving is different, I think is a really important issue to be attuned to too.
Language is tricky. Translations.
Any final comments before we hand back to Damien?
Tim, I want to thank you very much for this space. Having great to have this reflective space for us to reflect on our practice, what I think is the essence of supervision. So thank you for offering this opportunity. I want to encourage everybody to support me to come up with a topic to the presentation for the rest of the year. So if you can come up with anything, please send me a note. Next month is August, it's holidays in many places. So we are going to skip the session in August. So the next session will be in 2 months in September. And if anybody has any idea, maybe Carrie asked you to do a session on ethics, the one that you did for the class, maybe you can, if you want to, we can talk about that later. We'll invite you to do it. I think it's great to learn more about the new code of ethics from the International Coaching Federation. I am also part of the Global Supervisors Network. And they have, I facilitated this month's session on the new EMCC supervision framework. So EMCC revised the supervision framework. It just came up with a new one. Not very different than the old one, but I really like it. It's very clear and organized. So maybe we want to spend some time doing that too. It's one of the sessions. Invite somebody from EMCC to come and present on that. And also we have a session, a recording from Thomas, who works at ICF, and he explained the one from ICF too. But because there were two sessions, one was in the middle of the night for me, but I wake up to do it, but he couldn't, so he recorded that session. So I may be able to share that session with you, and we can watch that piece, so he doesn't have to come because he's in the East Coast, so will be 8 for us, will be like 11 p.m. for him, too late. So we can, I think we can do that session here too. I think people will benefit from that too. If you have any other ideas, again, this is a space for all of us. So anything that you want to see, any suggestions that you have, please let me know. And team, again, thank you very much, and great seeing everyone. I hope you can make it in September. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Is all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.